Hey, good evening, folks, Americans and Patriots. My name is Chad Prather. I'm filling in for Dinesh D'Souza. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast. Today, I've been over here trying to see if I felt guilty for being white. A lot of people are wanting you to do that if you have been cursed with white melanin. We'll see more about that on this topic. It's a real topic, folks. Stay tuned. We're going to get into it.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast. My name is Chad Prather. I'm filling in for Dinesh. Always appreciative of he and Debbie giving me the opportunity, affording me the privilege, if you will, to come and sit in for them. We always have a great time, have a good conversation. I hope you are able to enjoy it as well. I know sometimes it's a little bit difficult when you've got someone that you've tuned into to listen to on a regular basis, and now you have a different voice. I try to honor that and try to give you the best possible content that's available with some great guests, and today I think will be no different. My friend Jeremy Carl is going to join us. He's got an incredible book that is dangerous to read. It's a book called The Unprotected Class. And I'll tell you, today we're going to dive into a couple of things that I think might just get us banned from polite society. And it's real interesting how we like to sort of tiptoe around the real difficult and delicate issues. And they really shouldn't be difficult or delicate. We should be able to talk about, especially in a country that believes in free speech and believes in liberty, we should be able to talk about all these topics because there's no other way for us to get these ideas out of our brains and into each other's brains critically without using language. But there's some things that just become hot button topics that people don't want to touch. This is one they don't want to talk about on a college campus sociology class. It's really not. I'll just get right to it, and we're going to discuss this today with Jeremy. Being white, being white, the melanin of your skin, it's no longer a neutral issue here in America, and I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. In fact, if you really look at how things are shaping up and how they've been across the board, it may be the only identity in this country that you're allowed to openly hate. It's like free game on white folks. It sounds strange to say, doesn't it? But now, before all you cancel mobs start typing out your responses in all caps, this isn't about victimhood. This is about truth, and I want to deal in truth. The truth, as we're going to talk about today, is it's in short supply. So let's have it. Let's have a good conversation about it. You know, one of the things that we got to remember is that white Americans have become the one group in America that you can discriminate against. You can say anything you want to say. You can legally, socially, culturally attack them, and you can do it without any repercussions. Not only is it accepted, but if you spend a minute online, it's literally celebrated. So, you got schools across the nation. Kids are being taught that whiteness is a problem, that it needs to be solved. In corporate boardrooms across America, you have white employees that are told to sit down and shut up and check their privilege. You've heard that before. In the media, well, if you're white and you make a mistake, you're not an individual, you're a symptom. I always say that a slip of the lip will get you hung by the tongue, so you got to be careful with everything you say. We've gone from the content of character to the color of your skin at warp speed. What used to be a call for equality has become a system of inversion where past wrongs are used to justify present-day discrimination. And that's not justice, folks. That's vengeance with just let's call it a new paint job. According to Jeremy, as we're going to get into today, this is not an organic cultural shift that we're seeing. This has been deliberate. It's been embedded because society, much of it here in America, has been brainwashed, and it's literally now been part of our legal framework thanks to policies like affirmative action and disparate impact rulings and race-based hiring quotas. These aren't bug in the system errors, if you will. These are features of the new unofficial Constitution, one that prioritizes group identity over individual rights. So let's be real clear. This isn't about politics. It's cultural, spiritual, and foundational. So now you have institutions built by generations of Americans, whether it's churches, universities, the military. They've started to crumble under the weight and the pressure of a racialized ideology. We're literally witnessing a controlled demolition of American unity. And you have to ask yourself, who's behind this? Who's wanting this to happen? Because this is very deliberate. It's very orchestrated. Now, I don't want you to mistake what I'm saying for some plea for white grievance. It sounds silly to say, but this isn't about a superiority. It's about sanity. It's about refusing to play the game where the rules change based on skin color or the truth is redefined by ideological mobs. So rather than breed healing, I believe that with the advent of the Obama administration's race relations in this country were set back probably 60 or 70 years. And rather than having healing, it's led to hostility. And this type of attitude, this type of cultural shift has bred resentment. It's pitted neighbor against neighbor. It's replaced national identity with what I guess you could assume is tribal warfare. And I want to be real honest with you. A country can't survive if the majority of its people, through its media, through its institutions of education or this courts or even the corporate world, if you're taught to hate yourself, you can't continue on, and you certainly can't be great. Now, I'm not saying that racism's never existed. Of course it did. But what's happening now is not correction, it's overcorrection. It's being fueled by academic Marxism and carried out by bureaucratic cowards that are too scared to speak up and be honest. So what do? Well, I don't want you to be left in despair, and I don't think that this episode's going to do that. I think we're going to actually give not only some hope, but some optimistic solutions. Because I want us to come back to a place as a society of merit. That should matter. We should come back to a place of fairness, if something like that even exists anymore. We should come back to a place of something I alluded to in yesterday's episode, and that is not just a justice, but a colorblind justice. We need courage in this day and age, courage to speak, courage to say no to these corrosive ideologies, and even stand up in the face of the mob that's screaming against us. And remember that equal treatment, it isn't optional in a free society. It's absolutely essential. So if you want to fight racism, great, fight it. I agree with you. I don't think we should have racism. I think it's a cancer that needs to be absolutely eradicated from our society. But if we're going to do it, then I contend that we do all of it. Fight against all of it. Even the kind that's dressed up in, an Ibram Kendi, ex-Kendi, whatever his name is, when it's dressed up in his type of an anti-racist language. So I want to talk to you today about, not necessarily an expose of what's happening in our society, but I want to hold a mirror up to ourselves. And I want to ask us, as Americans, do we still believe in equal justice under law? Or is that only when it's convenient? Because that's a scary place to stand. If we stay silent right now, then we're not going to have a nation left to speak up for. So I want you to buckle up, folks. We're going to have a great episode. We're going to have a great conversation. I can't wait to talk to Jeremy about his incredible book it's called The Unprotected Class. And I want us to expose the double standards. And I want to learn. I want to be educated myself. Because at the end of the day, I want to push back on the cultural lies. I want to push back on the falsehoods. I don't believe in your truth and my truth. I believe there is the truth. There is empirical, objective truth, and we have to find it. And the lies that are poisoning the American soul have got to be wiped out. And here's the thing: on today's episode, I don't think we're going to whisper. I think we're going to shout it from the rooftops, and might even get a little bit controversial. And that's what happens whenever you tell the truth, even when it is unfashionable. And sometimes truth being unfashionable is what freedom demands. And I think you and I love our freedom. That's the essence of being an American. I like to say that I don't want to do anything in this world if I'm not having fun doing it. Well, you know what helps you have fun is freedom to do it. So I'm looking forward to an incredible conversation. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast, both on Rumble, on YouTube, all the places where you can find the audio version. And of course, thank you for tuning in via Salem Radio. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, engage in the chat, and leave a hard comment. You hit that thumbs up button, but also leave a hard comment down below because that helps the algorithm and it pushes the viewership even higher. I encourage you, go to where podcasts are offered, whether it's on Apple or Spotify or wherever it is you may get your podcast audio, and leave a 5-star rating when you have the opportunity to do that, because I believe the Dinesh D'Souza program absolutely deserves that. And leave a rating when you get an opportunity with a review so that it drives the show higher up into the rankings and gets even more and newer viewers. So again, I'm Chad Prather, filling in for Dinesh D'Souza. When we come back, my friend Jeremy Carl is going to join us. I want to talk to him about his book, The Unprotected Class. Hang tight. We'll be right back.
There's been a national focus on eating only the healthiest of foods, and that's great news for Balance of Nature. Their method of producing a vibrant nutritional supplement is second to none. While so many others use chemicals and additives, Balance of Nature is made solely from whole food ingredients. While other methods sacrifice nutritional quality for the sake of profits and volume, Balance of Nature's advanced vacuum cold process involves freeze-drying the fruits and veggies into a fine powder, helping to retain as much nutritional value as possible compared to other inferior methods which cut corners at your expense. Balance of Nature packs a nutritional punch, and that's the whole reason for taking this right here, Balance of Nature, fruits and veggies in a capsule, getting the most nutrition for the sake of your health. Use my discount code, it's America. You get 35% off plus free shipping and a money-back guarantee. Call 800-246-8751. Again, it's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code America, you get 35% off plus free shipping. Mike Lindell and the MyPillow team want to say a big thank you for your continued support. This spring, they had a huge allotment of their famous bed sheets set aside for the big box stores, but guess what? The stores didn't come through again, and so Mike's doing what he does best. He's passing the savings directly on to you. That's right, no middleman means you get wholesale pricing on their top-of-the-line Giza Dream Sheets and the Percale bed sheets. So the Giza Dream Sheets, queen size, normally $139.98, now just $69.99. The Percale Sheets Queen, normally $89.98, now just $29.98. All sizes are available at the discount rate too. These are premium sheets at prices you won't find anywhere else, but they won't last long. When they're gone, they're gone, so act now. Go to mypillow.com, use promo code Dinesh, or you can call 800-876-0227. The number again, 800-876-0227 to grab this exclusive deal.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Dinesh D'Souza program. I'm Chad Prather, filling in for Dinesh. Yes, I'm a white, heterosexual, Christian, conservative cowboy. The hat gives it away, right? I've gotten soft hands. I've spent too much time in the air conditioning. I like to describe myself as public enemy number one. These days, one of the reasons I've kept the cowboy hat on all these years is because people love to underestimate you, and they come at you and they make their assumptions about you because, like, who is this hillbilly redneck? Well, today, I'm not going to apologize for being a white guy. I didn't have anything to do with that 0.00001% DNA part of me that made me a Caucasian and melaninally challenged. Try to say that 5 times. I'm not going to apologize for it, man. We're going to shake things up a little bit today, and we're going to bring on my friend Jeremy Carl. He is a senior fellow at the Claremont Institute, formerly Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Interior. Man, he's got an incredible book, and you guys... you got to get this book, The Unprotected Class, How Anti-White Racism is Tearing America Apart. Welcome to the show, Jeremy Carl. Jeremy, how are you? How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Chad. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. I mean, when you look at a guy like me, I got a target on my back 100% these days with the rhetoric that's going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and this is what we see. I mean, now not so much. I live in Montana, so you'd fit in actually pretty well where I live. But in most of America, that's absolutely true, right? And that's what we're fighting. And we see some of this with the Afrikaner immigration dust up that we've just had. But we see it everywhere. We see it in kind of how we're doing criminal justice and the school system. I mean, a million other areas in Hollywood. That's why I wrote the book.
It's a great book. You've got a lot of fantastic concepts in there. Do you find it where it just sort of seems like a weird topic, in a country that had the institution of slavery, and we know that we've been preached to over and over again about the country's scars and its previous historic sins, and we've been told that we can't say anything, in regards to the actual history of those. We can't defy the narrative of both the revisionist and the forbidden history. We can't say anything about that. We can't correct anybody because that would be racist of us to do something like that. How dare we put a Band-Aid on such a colossal scar? But now the script has been flipped. They're painting things in a whole other brushstroke these days. And the biggest sin out there is to be white because you're automatically born into privilege. And therefore, we shouldn't have an opinion on anything. How dare we, unless we're willing to join the woke mob? Now, let me just say as an anecdote, a couple of years ago, I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa, of course, it's got its history of race relations and riots and problems there. I was there at a Trump rally. This was towards the end of COVID when people were emerging from their caves and coming out and being out in public again. And they had a Black Lives Rally matter out there, and I counted roughly about 700 people marching down the street. And I only saw, and I'm not lying to you, Jeremy, this is no exaggeration, I think I saw 3 people of color in the entire crowd. So there were white people marching for BLM in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This phenomena, I said, what in the world is going on? I mean, this was insane. This was like be like the equivalent of a bunch of men marching in a Me Too rally. Who are you representing here? What's going on in our world? I mean, what is this shift? Why? And it's become not only, as I said, accepted. This shift of hating white people has become celebrated. What's going on?
Well, I mean, thanks. You didn't even do it intentionally, but you perfectly led me into the subject of my next book, which is to look at the white left and why it's so insane and how damaging it is. So that's the book that I'm writing right now. I don't have it yet up on Amazon for pre-order, but it'll get there. But that's a great topic, Jeremy, because let me say, there's nothing more insufferable than a white liberal woman. I'll just throw that out there. Well, they get their chapter. They get a chapter in there. But yeah, I mean, that's what I'm looking for, is to really try to answer that question. And because I'm a think tank scholar, I mean, I'm not trying to do this. And my previous book, The Unprotected Class, is the same thing. You've read it. I'm not just trying to kind of throw out the most red meat and be as incendiary as I can. I mean, it's a really attempt to be a scholarly and serious look at what is this craziness and why is it going on? And in saying this, and you kind of touched on this, in no way, and I make this clear in The Unprotected Class as well, of course, I'm not suggesting that there's no history of anti-Black or anti-Hispanic or other types of racism in America. I'm talking about, in the year 2025 of our Lord, what is the most politically salient form of racism? And it really has been anti-white racism, although the Trump administration has done tremendous things above and beyond anything that I could have really expected to address that. And frankly, that's because, I mean, there are many reasons, but no small number of senior Trump officials working in this area had read my book. And I'd like to think that had a little bit to do with at least what went on.
So I'm curious, if you go back to the goals of the civil rights movement, and an MLK who says we care about the content of your character, not the color of your skin, the goals and the values of at least what was espoused for the civil rights movement has kind of been hijacked. What started as a push for equal treatment has turned into a system of everything from, and I've called out everything from critical race theory. I even lumped SEL, social emotional learning, in there. A lot of people I caught a lot of flack for calling that out. And I said, they just keep repackaging. They just keep repackaging this stuff, and they keep putting it back out there in our brainwashing institutions. And because it just seems, whether it's man's inhumanity to man or whatever it may be, we're now living in this DEI spectacle where you have one class of people who, because they supposedly have held the majority and therefore by default are accused of being the ones who have the most power and privilege, they're the ones who are not allowed to speak anymore. They're not allowed to speak up. So again, the dissent, as I said, it is celebrated in a situation like this. How does a country survive with this type of rhetoric?
I don't think it does unless we change course. And that's why I wrote the book, right? Because you can't sort of exist in a country that is simultaneously multi-ethnic and, intentionally polarized in this sort of a way. It's not sustainable. We've got all sorts of history to show, not in the America per se, but everywhere else, that type of thing tends to end in a disaster, particularly in a democratic system. I mean, sometimes in a more authoritarian system like Singapore, for example, you can have a kind of strongman but effective leader who can kind of keep a lid on things. But in a place where everybody's just gets a vote and you're sort of as they say in India, where I lived briefly in the past, you don't cast your vote, you vote your caste. And, we'd have the same sort of thing going on potentially here if we don't address it. Again, Trump did a great job of sort of blowing that up in a variety of ways. He had the best percentage of minority votes of any GOP candidate in modern history. But if we don't kind of address the underlying laws, and the president has done a great job of doing this, everything from affirmative action to disparate impact to getting rid of DEI. If you don't go out and, get to the root of that, then you're still going to wind up in the same problem. Incidentally, that's just one of many reasons why kind of the Congress really needs to pass these rescissions, pass the Doge cuts, and make sure that some of this stuff that we've done from Trump, for which he's taken some eras, is not just a temporary victory, but something where we really permanently fix things.
Yeah, because if we don't get ourselves in gear with this Congress, while we do have, as they say, a razor thin margin of majority, it's not worth any more than the paper it's written on. There's no teeth to the executive order without codifying this. Do you think, as a side note, in regards to that, do you think Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, is sort of holding out on these things in order to leverage their political peacock preening, if you will, as they head towards the midterms? That keeps some leverage and power so they get reelected and maybe even push further to get more seats flipped? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned, obviously, by what I see, both the just general legislative inactivity and then some of the things that have been coming out of some of our congressmen about, these fairly, in my view, extreme demands for what they're going to take to support some of these bills. And I think this is a great litmus test because, look, I'm far too cynical about politics after this number of years to actually expect our legislators to take hard votes. I'm not actually expecting them to do that. That's not my requirement. What I do expect them to do is take easy votes if they're actually on our side at all, right? Which is to say, we're targeting stuff that, okay, like, there may be some vague friend of ours or some donor of yours who's hurt by it. But overall, I mean, all this stuff is waste, fraud, and abuse. It's hurting our enemies. It's helping our friends. We should just be for that for totally cynical political reasons, even if it weren't all good policy, which it is. So if we can't get a majority on a lot of this stuff, that's going to be a real warning signal. And this is going to be a real test of Johnson's leadership. It's going to be a test of Thune's leadership. And, I can just hope they pass because the alternative is a little bit too grim to contemplate.
Yeah, I noticed just this morning, or it might have been last night, Scott Pressler had made a tweet in regards to Speaker Mike Johnson where he said, if you don't do something with this SAVE Act and we really protect our elections and get some election integrity, codified through this, you won't be the speaker in the next term. You won't be the guy. I tend to agree with that. I think these guys are sort of shooting themselves in the foot, if you will. But we'll get back to that. We're going to take a quick break, Jeremy. I want to talk about these Afrikaners who have come over, these what I consider to be true refugees, the blowback that's coming, the court of public opinion, if you will, and what this looks like, what it means, what it's all about, and how this is sort of a a direct exhibit or illustration of these things that we're talking about as you say, the unprotected class. So hang tight. We're going to take a break. Again, I'm Chad Prather filling in for Dinesh D'Souza. My guest, Jeremy Carl. We got a lot more to get into. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And don't forget to hit that like button.
This July, there's a global summit of BRICS nations in Rio de Janeiro, the bloc of emerging superpowers, China, Russia, India, Iran. They're meeting with the goal of displacing the U.S. dollar as the global currency. They're calling it the Rio Reset. Now, as BRICS nations push forward with their plans, global demand for U.S. dollars could decrease, bringing down the value of the dollars in your savings. While this transition won't happen overnight, the Rio Reset in July marks a pivotal moment when BRICS objectives may move decisively from theoretical possibility toward reality. Learn if diversifying your savings into gold, like I did, is right for you. Birch Gold Group can help you move your hard-earned savings into a tax-sheltered IRA in precious metals. Claim your free information kit on gold by texting my name, Dinesh, to 989898. Birch Gold has an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau, tens of thousands of happy customers. Let Birch Gold arm you with a free, no-obligation information kit on owning gold before July and the Rio Reset. Text Dinesh to 989898 today. Most of us think Medicare is something to deal with someday. That's how I felt until recently. I'm 64 now, and the moment you hit that number, it begins. The junk mail, the robocalls, the TV ads with washed-up celebrities. None of it made sense, and the more I looked into it, the clearer it became. This system is meant to be confusing. Why? Because it lets big insurers profit from your uncertainty. In fact, the DOJ just filed a major lawsuit accusing some of the largest Medicare brokers of misleading seniors, steering them into plans that paid the highest kickbacks, not the best coverage. That's why I turned to Chapter. Chapter is independent. Their advisors walk you through every option, unbiased, pressure-free, and help you to find the plan that's right for you, all at no cost. So if you're turning 65, or even if you're over 65, do what I did. Call Chapter, dial pound 250, then say Dinesh. Don't let big insurance decide for you. Take control. Call Chapter today. That's pound 250, keyword Dinesh.
All right. Chad Prather filling in for Dinesh D'Souza. Jeremy Carl is with me. He is the author of the book, The Unprotected Class. Enjoy that book, man. It's bold. It's bold. And, I think that people accuse us of just sort of being an outrage mob or coming up with the next crisis for clicks and all of that stuff. But this is an issue that really needs to be talked about. I'll tell you an interesting story. Back during the election, I did a video in which I posted as a reel, put it over on TikTok. Yes, I put it on TikTok, where I ridiculed Kamala Harris for consistently changing her accent, regardless of who she was in front of. She just became a chameleon. That tends to be what happened with a lot of these progressive libs, and I called her out on that. To say that I was attacked is an understatement. I had events that got canceled for calling that out. The outrage mob came after me. How dare I? There were threats on my life. There were threats of violence. Nothing that I'm not used to. I've lived with that plenty of times in my life. But I was amazed at how it was celebrated. The rhetoric of violence and vitriol celebrated by these others. And all because calling out something that, honestly, I don't think the outrage mob was even aware that I was calling out something that was factually true. They just felt like here I was ridiculing or mocking a person or calling out a person of color, particularly a woman of color. Forget the fact that she's not black. Right. Whatever. Who cares? I mean, we start splitting all these things. It's become celebrated. These South African Afrikaners come here. I had someone ask me this morning, they said, what's an Afrikaner? I said, well, they're Dutch and French heritage. They're, from South Africa. For instance, Elon Musk, he's from South Africa, but he's now not an Afrikaner, okay? And so, a lot of times the different cultural differences and stuff is foreign to us here in America because we don't know anything about the rest of the world, right? As to summarize Mark Twain, who said, nothing destroys prejudice like travel and nothing destroys travel like prejudice. And that is so true of Americans with our, colloquial provincial ways of living. We don't understand a cosmopolitan worldview. What's going on with this story? So you had 59 of them as refugee status.
Yeah.
I noticed that they were obviously the whiteness of their skin, but I noticed it wasn't 10,000 military-aged males storming the southern border. These were people waving American flags. These were husbands. These were wives. These were small children. These were families escaping persecution and violence in South Africa. What's the story there? What's going on with this?
Yeah, well, you had all these libs kind of on Twitter saying this is not what a refugee family looks like. It's like, no, we've not seen any refugee families in so long. We've just seen these economic migrants LARPing as refugees. But you've forgotten this is exactly what refugees look like. It's entire families fleeing the area, and so you touched on it kind of interestingly. And nicely, the racial history of South Africa is very complicated on a number of dimensions. Sure. But one of them is that you have a big split between the Afrikaners, who, by the way, have been in South Africa for 400 years. Okay, these are not Johnny-come-latelys. I mean, if they're not African, then we are certainly not American, right? It's a similar type time that they arrived there. And then you've got the British white South Africans who are the predominant other group. And it's about split 50-50, but they're not actually even subject here, although frankly they could have been. But they particularly, this order targeted the Afrikaners because the Afrikaners are and have been for hundreds of years a traditional agricultural community. And a lot of these racist attacks have happened particularly against Afrikaner farmers. They've been really kind of too horrific. The details to share on your program here, but I mean, really, really terrible stuff. And that's in addition to urban violence. And then beyond that, you've got leading political figures doing chants called "Kill the Boer," which is, again, there's a lot of history behind that, but basically directly threatening these groups who are looking, by the way, also at what happened in what used to be Rhodesia is now Zimbabwe, 40 years ago. And again, we don't know a lot of history in America, so a lot of folks don't necessarily know about that. But you had a thriving white agricultural community that was essentially wiped out by a racist tyrant, Mugabe, which also led to the starvation of lots of his Black African constituents in Zimbabwe. So we don't want to see that repeated in South Africa. And even just sending a warning shot by doing this is I think, helpful in that regard.
I've had a number of guests over the years who, on my show, the Chad Prather Show, who are from South Africa, and they've detailed the atrocities that have happened. It doesn't negate the atrocities that happens on one or the other. I always remind people, I say, we had a whole lot of slaves in America, and a lot of them were Irish. People tend to not think of, the different. It wasn't about skin color, and people don't like to be reminded that it was, the West Africans in places like Ghana and Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, that were selling. One tribe was selling another tribe in order to come to America. I've spent extensive amounts of time in West Africa, as you say, Zimbabwe. I've been to South Africa numerous times. I've seen these various cultures, and again, we tend to interpret it in light of a very provincial viewpoint, a very laser-focused, narrow-minded viewpoint in terms of not understanding how big the global culture is and how diverse it really is. But what I find interesting when I see these people just lashing out, the liberals, the X-mob or whatever, is there when they hear the word refugee, they think that's got to be a person of a color other than white, right? And so when they see these folks, they're like, these aren't refugees. These aren't really refugees. And I contend, and I'd love to get your opinion on this. Like, I think that even with legal immigration here in this country, I think we've opened the borders for so long that I think we almost need to shut everything down until we can process who is in this country right now, who is here. And again, I'm not talking about refugees. I'm talking about immigrants, true immigrants, not the illegal aliens. But all of it almost needs to be sorted out right now, for a lack of better terms. What do you think? I mean, have we gotten so overblown that we obviously don't know who's in the country?
Well, I agree. And I wrote this, and I even did it in the context of just making clear my own views, even on the refugee crisis, which is I would just start with a net zero immigration period right now, even including refugees. But given that in a bipartisan way, we've decided that we're going to have some limited number of refugees, it makes sense to take this group that is hardworking, that has a similar ethnic and religious background to the historic majority population of the U.S., and that, you know, we have a lot of history of success in integrating these folks here. They're not going to be a permanent client class to the left, and that's one of the reasons that the left really objects to them. So I think that that's really what's at issue here. And then you have groups like the Episcopal Church really kind of giving the game away by saying, well, we don't want to resettle these white people. You know, we were happy to do that for 40 years for all sorts of other people and take federal money, but this is just a bridge too far. And it really kind of illustrates the fact that this isn't really about refugees for them. It's about replacing the current population of the United States with a different population. You know, so I think they've sort of given the game up, as it were.
I'm glad you brought that up about the Episcopal Church. I'd actually forgotten that point. They separated themselves completely and said, no, we're not going to do this because, again, for them, this is the essence to me of identity politics. These people just happen to be the wrong color. You know, we've had the governor of Massachusetts saying, if you have an extra bedroom, open your door to these refugees and let them come live in your home. We had people, I think there was a woman in Boston 2 years ago who was talking about the Haitians that lived with her. And she was like, oh, they're the best cooks and the best housekeepers. And, you know, I'll never forget the folks on Martha's Vineyard who, you know, made cookies for the folks that Ron DeSantis sent up there. And then within 24 hours, were waving them, you know, as though they were, you know, kids going off to college. But the hypocrisy of the whole thing is astounding to me. What you just described goes back to Johnson's 1965. You know, the Sellers, was it Carney Sellers, the Immigration Nationality Act of 1965, where prior to 1965, we were an origins-based immigration policy. We wanted people, I think 80 to 85% of our immigrants were coming from European nations. They were places where people could most likely assimilate because they had, in many cases, a shared language or at least a shared value system. You know, I think by the mid-'80s and by 90, I think 85% of the immigrants coming here were coming from third world countries, or they're coming from Asia, Central, South America, Mexico. They were coming from Africa. So they flipped the script because, again, the liberals in 1965 and again under Lyndon Johnson said, okay, they didn't say this, but this is my interpretation, is we're not going to ever win on our ideas, so we need to change the audience. And so the replacement is a key word. They needed to replace the demographic and the population of the United States. So when they see people come in like this, obviously they're going to have a meltdown. Do you see maybe this a little bit reversing back to an origins-based immigration policy with this administration?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't say for sure, but I do think this is like the one area in which I am willing to defend a ethnic and culturally conscious policy. In general, I'd like to be colorblind, but I think when you talk about who you're going to let in the country, it makes sense to prioritize people who, in various ways, and again, it's not just race to me, it could be religion, it could be some other cultural factor, who have some similarity and affinity with the historic majority population of the country. I think that's just a sensible thing to do, because I think that if not, you just kind of wind up with this really fractious polity with no real sense of who you are or who it is. So I think that this does make a lot of sense to do it that way.
Yeah, and before we go to break, I will remind everybody, because you make a great point about it's not just about skin color. You're talking about religions and everything else. I mean, here in Texas, we've been dealing with that East Plano Islamic Center. Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, is put a halt to that. I don't know where that's going to go, but we're literally seeing the Islamization of Texas, of all places. And again, you can't have people that are pursuing Sharia and say that's compatible with the Bill of Rights or the U.S. Constitution. So again, you have to be, you got to be the big meanie and say some of these things they can't coexist, right? I mean, it's not going to work like that. So Here we are. All right, take a quick break, a few more reactions from Jeremy, and talk about some fun stuff in the next segment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey guys, welcome back. Chad Prather filling in for Dinesh D'Souza for the Dinesh D'Souza podcast. One of these days I'll get good at that rolling off my tongue, but until then, I'll just keep stumbling over it. Jeremy Carl's with me. The late, great economist Milton Friedman, I love to kind of summarize one of the things that he said was that you can have an open border or you can have a welfare state. You can't have both. They're going to fall in on each other. You can't. Those things are going to be mutually destructive of one another. That house of cards is going to fall. When I think back of the last 4 years where no one was at the helm, really, we just kind of had a dementia-ridden, leader, if you want to call him that, puppet. The auto pen, I guess, was ruling everything. That's sort of what we had, though. We had, people in our shelters and our hotels and getting the $5,800 debit cards and a free ticket to travel around the country. Murderers, rapists, human traffickers had free reign around it, and they were on the federal dime traveling. We saw that. We were supporting them. What happens if this administration and ultimately this Congress doesn't get this codified, doesn't get these things taken care of, and we flip back to that? How long does America last with this type of a nightmare going on?
Well, I don't know, Chad. I mean, I think this is one of my big worries is that there's a lot of just pretend going on in DC about particularly looking at the level of these deficits that we've got. I mean, we are going to have to do what the most painful things that Donald Trump is doing with Doge are just a small fraction of what we are eventually going to have to cut one way or another. And this is not because I'm, bad or I'm, trying to be a mind. It's just like, this is math, right? Like we can't just keep borrowing trillions of dollars. And so your point raising on Milton Friedman is completely correct. And this is the real, I think, where we're kind of hiding how bad some of this mass immigration has been, in that everything looks fine as long as we've got the money to pay for everybody's welfare and everything else. When those checks start running out, then things are going to get really, really chaotic. And a lot of your listeners and viewers who are Second Amendment advocates are going to be glad that they were Second Amendment advocates. Yeah. And I say that not in a way of that anybody should be doing anything offensive, but just that we may have a real breakdown in social order when that happens. And it may be every person for himself in some places. That's a very scary prospect. It's one of the real reasons why we need to get both the immigration policy and the federal budget under control.
I've said it for a long time, especially over the last 4 years with this open border policy that was here. I mean, the Biden administration literally has blood on their hands. I mean, people lost their lives because of federal policy. And I said, you're talking about race. I mean, the black community, which I don't like using any community phrase. I don't like adding a color and then a community. I hate that phrase, but for lack of better terms in this moment, I would say the black community needs to, particularly the urban community, the ones that tend to maybe be a little more dependent on the government, whether it's welfare, some impoverishment that's there, below a poverty level. Those are the ones who should be most concerned about this immigration, because you talk about replacement theory. They're the ones who's going to get hit the hardest when that so-called government cheese runs out.
Yeah.
And then things do have a tendency towards getting very, very violent. Do you think we've just put a Band-Aid on it, or do you think we're on a path to maybe getting some common sense back? Because I agree with you. I think a lot of it's just one big circus, and we're just kind of parading around.
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely insane what's going on, particularly in some of these minority communities, particularly in the African American community. The leadership is just totally betraying the interests of their own constituents, because they are going to be the ones they're most affected by this kind of lower skill, lower end migration, because disproportionately African Americans have had those sorts of jobs. We're now giving them away to people who are just off the boat from other countries. And it's real insanity. And the notion that this is somehow just going to work out for everybody is not really borne out by experience. And again, we've been sort of plastering over how bad this may look over time, just because right now we've got the money where we can run huge deficits, but those days are coming to an end rather quickly, unfortunately.
When they wrote the Green New Deal, whatever that is, I thought of it as being something that was probably dreamed up by a fourth grader who drew it on a piece of paper with a crayon. I thought there's no way this is going to work. I mean, a $95 trillion retrofit of America. But, these people with their modern monetary theories, the World Economic Forum and their globalist currency, and now we see what's going on with this Rio reset and the BRICS nations and things like that. The dollar is obviously taking a nosedive in a big way. I mean, we're basically carrying cash. If you have that, it's just a note of deficit and debt. But with modern monetary theory, they look at that as being a good thing. They like the debts and the deficits, and they like the government dependence, and they like more of that and the printing of the cash and the Fed being in control. And, it's more and more of bringing down America to a globalist level because we don't want American exceptionalism or American superiority. We don't want to put America first. We don't want to put, I'm at a point now of saying, let's put America only. And I think that's where we need to be for a time. I do believe, Jeremy, that the light that shines the farthest away shines the brightest at home. But we have so diminished our light of greatness in the name of calling it racist or nationalist or whatever label they've put on there. In your opinion, when you get together in the think tanks over there, what's the future of America look like? Where are we headed? Is it apocalyptically dismal, or is there hope?
Well, I think that the Trump election was a real inflection point. I think if we'd elected Kamala Harris, I always hate the rhetoric of every 4 years, this is the most important election of my lifetime. I think truly the one time I would actually say that legitimately, maybe the 1980 Reagan election, maybe. But this 2024 election, I really do think that was it. And I hate to even say it, but almost preemptorily, 2028 is going to be the same, because a lot of this stuff that we're doing, they're doing a lot of stuff by executive order. The Democrats, there's a little bit of a narrative that's false that, the Democrats can just undo it all by executive order. For a variety of reasons, that's not true. One of which is that you're bringing back a lot of these people, they're gone, no longer here. So you're going to get permanent changes there. But we've got to have the real 8 to 12 year window where we really codify what we're doing, set this up as the new baseline, set this up as the new normal. And then in that case, we're really going to be able to hopefully turn this ship around. But if not, look, there's a lot of really alarming scenarios in the future. And I think even under a best case scenario, things are going to be a lot harder for us in the coming years than they have been in the previous years. And I think the good opportunities it's going to give us an opportunity to, the cream is going to rise to the top. Men are going to get a chance to really kind of show leadership out there in a way that maybe they haven't in the past. And so I do think I'll never bet against America, but we do have a lot of challenges, and we are going to need strong men and women to rise up to meet those challenges.
You've got the book, The Unprotected Class, How Anti-White Racism is Tearing America Apart. I encourage everybody to read it. People say, that sounds radical. Well, it sounds like common sense to me. And I think we need to, if common sense is radical, then I think we need to get pretty radical. When can we anticipate the next tome from Jeremy Carl? When's the next book come out?
Well, in an optimistic thing, I'm sort of maybe a third of the way through writing this current one. So maybe sometime next year, there is a chance that a non-negligible chance I'll be going into the administration in some to be named capacity. And that would set things back a little bit, because those sorts of jobs that I'd be looking at, you don't have a lot of free time for writing. But I'd love to get this out as soon as I can. I think it's an important issue. It's the other end of the anti-white racism, is the ways that liberal whites are really kind of messing things up for everybody. So I hope I'll have that out and can share it with you and your listeners sometime in the future.
I can't wait to read that. You're a smart guy. You're articulate. You're eloquent. You're white. There's no doubt about it. We won't hold that against you. But you got to be crazy if you're considering an administration job. I'm just telling you, anybody involved in politics and bureaucracy these days, you got to have a screw loose. It's a wild world we're living in. It's a wild world. Jeremy Carl, thank you for joining me, my friend. We got through the technical difficulties, and here we are. So thank you for being with us, buddy. Take care. Special thanks to my guest, Jeremy Carl. Get his book, The Unprotected Class, and stay tuned for more from him. Make sure that you're following him over on X, and stay tuned. He's sharing a lot of great information, man. You can follow me as well at Watch Chad on X and on Instagram. Please tune in to the Dear America podcast that I host in the mornings, and also the Chad Prather Show in the afternoons. For Dinesh D'Souza, I am Chad Prather. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you next time. We love you. God bless.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.